Try to imagine this. You are standing in the middle of a wheat field in the Fayum region, 100 kilometers south of the Giza pyramids. All around you is farmland, sand, and endless dust. No ruins, no signposts, no tourists. Which raises the biggest question. If one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world, the largest structure anyone had ever seen in their lifetime, lay right here, why has nothing been left behind? The Hawara Labyrinth is not a legend. It was recorded by every ancient author over a span of 500 years, from the 5th century BCE to the Roman era. It once existed. It had enclosing walls. It had sacred ground. Then it vanished completely beneath the sand for more than 2,000 years. Not a single trace. Until modern science looked through the sand and found something no one was psychologically prepared to find. Today we will explore this story, from the man who built it, to those who lost it, to what technology is uncovering right now. With facts. First, some context, which many people misunderstand. When we think of ancient Egypt, we usually picture Giza. But those pyramids were not built by Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure around 2500 BCE. That was the Old Kingdom. What followed was a period of collapse lasting over 200 years, then the Middle Kingdom, a civilization that learned from the successes and failures of its ancestors, operating with a more sophisticated state apparatus, a more complex administrative system, and a greater challenge than ever before. How do you govern a territory stretching over 1,000 kilometers along the Nile from a single center? Pharaoh Amenemhat III ascended to the throne around 1860 BCE and reigned for nearly 40 years, one of the longest and most distinguished reigns in Egyptian history. He built 2 pyramids during his lifetime, which was not uncommon. But alongside his second pyramid at Hawara, he constructed something we still do not fully understand today. Herodotus, the Greek writer known as the father of history, visited Egypt around 450 BCE, more than 1,000 years after the structure was completed. He paid particular attention to Hawara, was led inside, and wrote that he could not describe what he saw. All the works of the Greeks and Egyptians that I have ever known combined do not equal it. This is a man who wrote about the pyramids without being rendered speechless, so these words carry their own weight. He described a complex of 3,000 rooms, 1,000 above ground, 1,000 below. He was permitted to walk throughout the upper level and recorded corridors that branched endlessly, ceilings carved with images of gods and strange animals, but every room absolutely empty of any objects. When he wished to descend to the lower level, his guide stopped him. The lower level is the resting place of the pharaohs and the sacred crocodiles. No outsider is permitted to enter. Herodotus recorded something beyond dispute. He left and wrote pages that, more than 2,000 years later, still convey his astonishment in every line. Herodotus was not the only witness. Strabo, the Greek geographer, visited in the 1st century BCE and confirmed the structure was still partially standing. He described it as surrounded by a wall and a large artificial lake. Pomponius Mela, the Roman historian, wrote that people entered and could not find their way out without a guide. Diodorus Siculus mentioned it as one of the most admired wonders of the world. Multiple authors, over 500 years, all describing a single structure at a single location. This was not one person's invention. This is an unbroken chain of historical evidence. But if so many people saw it, why did it disappear? The answer is not simply sandstorms or time, but a combination of both in a way that is entirely explainable. Hawara sat beside Lake Moeris, an enormous artificial lake built by ancient Egypt to regulate the Nile and irrigate the Fayum region. This system, at high water, supplied water to roughly 3,000 to 4,000 square kilometers of farmland, one of the most fertile regions in the ancient world. The Hawara Labyrinth was not merely a temple. It was an administrative center controlling the irrigation system and at the same time the principal temple of Sobek, the crocodile god representing the power and transformation of the Nile. Whoever controlled Hawara controlled the water. Whoever controlled the water controlled the lifeblood and real power of the kingdom. But around the 3rd century BCE, under the Ptolemies, the canal system was restructured to prioritize direct agriculture over long-term irrigation management. Lake Moeris shrank. The groundwater level in the surrounding basin dropped. There was nothing left to hold back the desert sand in this spot. Hawara lost its status as a center once Alexandria became the new capital. No maintenance, no settled population. Sand filled in the rest. Strabo, arriving in the 1st century BCE, found it already half in ruins. A century later, people referred to it only as a place name from the past. By the 7th century CE, when the Arabs conquered Egypt, no one knew where it lay anymore. 2,200 years beneath the sand. Modern search efforts began in the time of Napoleon. In 1799, the French expedition arrived in Egypt with hundreds of historians and scientists, an effort of unprecedented scholarly scale in the history of exploration. They knew of Hawara through Greek and Roman texts. They headed toward the region. They dug. And they failed miserably. Continuous sandstorms, groundwater rising into the excavation pits, sand filling everything back in. After a few weeks, they gave up. Then came Flinders Petrie in 1889. Petrie is regarded as the father of modern scientific archaeology. He brought to Hawara not just picks and shovels, but a methodology of systematic excavation, layer-by-layer documentation, and mapping of every stratum. He dug around every accessible face and found things that were genuinely remarkable. Granite blocks still standing in what had been the gateways, fired bricks of standardized dimensions, 30 by 30 by 7 centimeters, across the entire excavated area, indicating standardized industrial-scale production. 361 crocodile carcasses excavated from subsidiary pits, a number exactly matching the number of days in the ancient Egyptian calendar. This was not coincidence, and Petrie knew it, but he also knew his limits. He recorded in his journal that the bulk of the structure still lay below the accessible water level. After Petrie, no major excavation took place at Hawara for over 100 years, for a simple and practical reason. Groundwater and sandstorms made deep digging nearly impossible with the technology of the time. What changed everything was not a larger excavation. It was radar. GPR, ground-penetrating radar, operates by emitting electromagnetic pulses and receiving reflected signals. Different materials, air, water, stone, reflect waves differently. The result is a picture of what lies beneath the surface, without turning a single shovelful of earth. This technology has transformed archaeology over the past 20 years, in the way telescopes transformed astronomy. Instead of searching and digging blindly, we can look first and then decide where to dig. In 2008, a research team led by Professor Corrado Malanga, in collaboration with Ghent University of Belgium, carried out a GPR survey of the Hawara area as part of an official academic project. They did not dig, they only scanned. And the data collected over a few days of surveying took many months to analyze. The results revealed a massive artificial structure lying underground at precisely the location Herodotus described, spanning more than 300,000 square meters of walls standing edge to edge. The data clearly distinguished two distinct levels. The upper level, at a depth of roughly 2 to 3 meters, is what Petrie had reached. A network of fractured walls, collapsed brickwork, traces of corridors and chambers. The lower level, at a depth of 8 to 12 meters, tells an entirely different story. Continuous in every direction, walls standing upright, voids spaced at regular intervals with systematic consistency. No signs of collapse. The lower level of the Hawara Labyrinth may still be intact after nearly 4,000 years. To understand how this is possible, you need to understand how the structure was built. This is the part that causes many modern civil engineers to pause and reconsider what they know about materials and technique. Hawara was not built on natural ground. The area sits atop a naturally load-bearing clay layer, a site chosen by deliberate calculation, not chance. The builders excavated large pits, then backfilled them using a technique known as rammed clay, building up the foundation in dense 30-centimeter layers of mortar compound, creating a foundation of exceptional strength beyond that of ordinary walls in a humid environment. The outer walls were faced with granite blocks transported from the Aswan quarries, more than 500 kilometers to the south, by boat along the Nile during the high water season, then slid on wooden runners using sledges. These blocks were ground on one face to fit precisely against each other without mortar, relying on friction and gravity. This is the same technique used in the Giza pyramids, and is one reason they have remained standing through thousands of years of wind and erosion. And the lower level? Designed with no light and no outside ventilation, creating an environment nearly unchanged across thousands of years. Cold, damp, oxygen-poor, inhospitable to decay. That is why Egyptian mummies survive. It may be why the lower level of Hawara, designed on the same principles but at a far greater scale, remains intact while the upper level collapsed after the loss of maintenance. This raises the clearest question: what is inside? The honest answer is that we do not know. And this is the most important thing to understand about Hawara. Not that anyone is hiding something, but the genuine practical limits of current science. Ground-penetrating radar gives shape and structure, but does not identify the contents of the chambers. We do not know whether they are empty, burial stores, functional spaces, or some combination. What we know from historical records and the upper-level evidence is this. Hawara was the administrative center of the Fayum region, where officials from across Egypt gathered to document and resolve affairs of state of a complexity unseen in ancient Egyptian administration. It was the principal temple of Sobek, where sacred crocodiles were raised and buried according to ritual, their number symbolizing the days of the year. And it stood beside the main pyramid of Amenemhat III, whose underground passage system ran over a kilometer in length, whose design was so complex that it was broken into many times across the centuries, yet whose body was not found until Petrie's excavation. The real challenge facing archaeologists is not locating where to dig. Radar has pointed that out. It is how to excavate without destroying what they are looking for. Groundwater sits a bare 8 meters down, directly above the lower level of the labyrinth. Any excavation pit must cut through this water layer using high-capacity pumping systems and continuous pit wall reinforcement. After 4,000 years under the pressure of soil and water, the structure of the lower level is in equilibrium with its surrounding environment. One misstep could cause the entire thing to collapse. And if any organic material preserved in darkness for thousands of years lies inside, exposure to outside air could decompose it within hours, if not handled immediately under controlled conditions. This is not a reason not to proceed. It is a reason to proceed with the utmost care. Before closing, it is worth emphasizing the most important thing about the Hawara story. It needs nothing added beyond its foundational facts to be compelling. No secret technology, no conspiracy of silence, An administrative religious complex built by a civilization that operated for nearly 1,000 years, buried by the shifting hydrology and sediment of a changing landscape, and possibly still intact beneath the ground after 4,000 years. This is a genuinely extraordinary scientific story. The extraordinary lies not in what we do not yet know, but in what the ancient Egyptians achieved through intellect, organized labor, and a grasp of engineering that surpasses what later generations imagined was possible. The next time you look at an image of the Egyptian desert, think about the worker hauling a granite block 500 kilometers from the quarry to its position inside a temple whose contents no outsider was permitted to know. Think about the engineer calculating the foundation for a structure weighing millions of tons on soft clay beside a lake. Think about the designer of the lower level, never touched by light or wind, who may have calculated its preservation of whatever lay inside for 4,000 years after every person forgot the lower level existed at all. Herodotus was stopped at the threshold of the lower level. He was not permitted to know what it contained. We, 2,200 years later, stand before the same door. Only now, for the first time in history, we have the tools to see what lies on the other side. Whether to open it, and what we will find, is a story not yet finished.